I call the June 21st, 2022 City Council regular meeting to order. City Clerk Ben Lane, will you please conduct the roll call?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor David Ortega.
Present.
Vice Mayor Tom Durham.
Here.
Council members Tammy Caputi.
Here.
Betty Janik.
Here.
Kathy Littlefield.
Here.
Linda Milhaven.
Here.
And Solange Whitehead.
Here.
City Manager Jim Thompson.
Here.
City Attorney Sherry Scott.
Here.
City Treasurer Sonia Andrews.
Here.
City Auditor Sharon Walker.
Here.
And the clerk is present. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you. We have Scottsdale police officers Dustin Patrick and Sergeant Ben Hoster, as well as firefighter Josh Porter, if anyone needs assistance. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, asking Councilwoman Whitehead. Well, for my mayor's report, we continue to keep the people of Ukraine in the forefront of our thoughts. Let's please pause as we hope for their peace and in their struggle for freedom. Thank you. Well, partners such as held a very successful Juneteenth event at our Scottsdale Stadium Field House. We had approximately 1,000 people in attendance, and it was a great inaugural event. Next, we will have public comment. It's the opportunity for Scottsdale citizens to come forward on any non-agendized item. As such, the council cannot discuss or will not take any action on any of the comments by speakers, but they do have 3 minutes to address the council. We show one person at this point, Mitch Roth. Please come forward, state your name, address, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mitch Roth. I'm at 8644 East Chalmer Road in Scottsdale, I believe up in your neck of the woods. I'm here representing the Alta Sonora HOA. I'm also representing the Pinnacle Paradise and Pinnacle Peak Estates 3 HOA, and I'm here to discuss the issue of the sound wall that was originally promised to us along Pima Road between Pinnacle Peak and Happy Valley, and that basically in March that decision was rescinded. We had a meeting last week with members of the I believe it was the Transportation Board, and they presented their position as to why we're not going to have this sound wall incorporated anymore. Basically, it's $2 million more than it was originally planned back in 2017. Had the wall been done prior when we were told it was going to be done, that wouldn't have been an issue. You know, we have 335 homeowners that reside in the 3 HOAs. And we've had a number of meetings with city council, with city officials, planning people, and it was decided and granted to us that the wall would be built. And now with the hundreds, if not thousands, of new homes that are being built north and east of Pinnacle, of the intersection of Pinnacle Peak and Happy Valley Roads, It's, the traffic has just gotten crazy, the noise levels have gotten insane. And, you know, during our meeting last week, the city basically said, well, you know, we might have made some errors in the discussions initially and in our presentations, and we're going to take it under advisement. We talked about new sound studies that were not promised in any way, shape, or form. It's really difficult for us to understand. We had all these outreach discussions, and there was a lot of due diligence done, and then the city actually said, you need a sound wall. Okay, there's enough traffic, and this was 3 years ago, and now all of a sudden it's not needed, and it's not needed because of the cost increase. So we're here to tee up a meeting that's going to happen, that we're going to be presenting, I understand, on the 6th, where Elaine Mercado and her team are going to be presenting and looking for approval from the city, and we will be in attendance at that meeting. We would love to have a dialogue with Mr. Thompson. We understand you're the guy that might get involved in this, and you've had done a lot of work with community outreach and citizens, and we'd love to have a dialogue with you somewhere between now and then. So maybe we have a discussion about what is possible, what can and can't be done. So I appreciate your time, appreciate you listening. We would love to have that sound wall, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Well, I will now close public comment and move on. Our agenda was amended to include an additional consent agenda item, number 34A. It was added to the agenda on June 15, 2022, and requires a separate vote to remain on the agenda. Therefore, I would request a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to accept the item as presented.
I'll second that.
Moved and second, that includes item number 34A to the agenda. Next, we have the consent agenda itself, items 1 through 34A. At this point, we do open comment for any of the...
Mayor, I apologize. We need to do a...
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, let's vote on that. Sorry. Excuse me. Let's register your vote on the agenda as presented. Thank you. Unanimous. So, at this point, we will move forward with the consent agenda items 1 through 34A. We do make time available for public comment on any of those items. I'm looking at the clerk. There are none, and therefore I will close public comment. City Clerk, did you have something?
Mayor, I apologize.
Oh, yeah. You had one on 30. I'm sorry. There was one for agenda item number 30, which is the Experience Scottsdale. So if the speaker would come forward, state your name, and we will... It's Diana Smith. Thank you, Diana.
Good evening. I'm Diana Smith, and I live at 8205 East Jenin, Scottsdale, 85260. Before I begin, I do want to thank you most sincerely, each one of you, for your service. Truly, serving on boards and serving the public is a very difficult thing, and I do appreciate it. Thank you. I'm here tonight to urge full disclosure of the consent agenda item number 30, the city's destination marketing agreement with Experience Scottsdale. The supporting council report for this agenda item stated that the city has, for the last 45 years, enjoyed a public-private partnership with a destination marketing organization. Specifically, we have relied on the destination marketing expertise of Experience Scottsdale to achieve our city's prominence as a tourist destination. In turn, our city and our citizens have enjoyed the economic benefits that tourist spending has meant to our sales tax revenues. The new marketing services agreement described in Agenda Number 30 specifies that the traditional 50% bed tax revenues dedicated to destination marketing through our agreement with Experience Scottsdale will be reduced to 45%. It is explained that the remaining 5% of the destination marketing funds will be allocated to the city's newly created Destination Marketing Reserve Fund. That allocation to this reserve next year will be $1,250,000. That's an estimated number. While this new agreement imposes several new requirements on Experience Scottsdale, including 19 performance standards, documented compliance with accepted industry standards, reports of advertising effectiveness, disclosure of non-program expense reporting, and expanded auditing scope and frequency, there is no discussion of any requirements on the city's newly created reserve fund, such as the governance and administration of this new reserve, when or how the new reserves will be dispersed, who will have authority to designate spending from this new reserve, or even how expenditures from this new reserve will be coordinated with the marketing program for Experience Scottsdale. As a Scottsdale citizen and registered voter, I consider this new agreement to be a breach of the direction that I, along with 56.35% of all voters, gave on March 9, 2020. Special election held when we decided that 50% would go for tourism marketing and the other 50% for destination events. The language in that election's official ballot made it absolutely clear a yes vote for Proposition 200 authorized an increase in the transient lodging bed tax to 50%, to 50% and promised the city would use the 50% of the total revenue for destination marketing. My vote for that Proposition 200 never allocated bed tax revenues to be placed in a reserve or slush fund for the city's spending discretion. This is not the transparency that Scottsdale voters deserve. This is not the respect a voters vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And continuing there, I see no other public comment on the consent agenda items, so I would close public comment. At this point, also, if there's any clarification council needs on items 1 through 34A, seeing none, I'm open to a motion and a second.
I make a motion to accept consent agenda items 1 through 34A.
Second.
I heard approve, not accept.
I'm sorry, approve.
Thank you. I heard a
Second.
and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please register your vote. Thank you. Unanimous. I do want to point out that item 20 of the consent agenda included acceptance of $1 million from the Scottsdale Railroad and Mechanical Society, a generous contribution to make another venue available at the Stillman McCormick Railroad Park. So thank you very much. I was there to accept the funds, and I'm not sure if there's a representative from that group, but again, our heartfelt thanks. Secondly, I do want to comment on item number 30, which is the Experience Scottsdale, which was approved. This is a 5-year agreement. So every 5 years or so, we catch up on all of those needed details, and certainly look forward with pleasure to monitoring and other successful events. A reserve is noted, and it is also dedicated to destination marketing purposes. Moving on, we will now go to the regular agenda items, item number 35 through 38, and we will hear the presentation. Item number 35, Frank Lloyd Wright Storage Rezoning and Conditional Use Permit, case number 8, ZN 2021, and 16 UP 2021. Jeff Barnes is a senior planner. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Jeff Barnes with the city's Planning Department, giving you a combined presentation on these two cases, 8ZN 2021 and 16 UP 2021. This site is located in the highlighted area on the slide here, which is north of Frank Lloyd Wright Boulevard, west of the 101 freeway, backing up to the CAP Canal to its northern boundary. A little bit further out context, just to give you some location, across the canal to the north is the TPC golf course. To the west, generally, of this site, you'll encounter the airport. To the northeast is Westworld, and to the south, we've got other commercial properties, auto dealerships, and similar uses. Getting a little closer view of this site, you'll see it's a long linear vacant property that sits behind some existing commercial developments, and again backing up to the canal with its northern boundary. This site gains its primary access through the drive aisle between the Dunn Edwards Paints and the Vans Pro Shop to achieve access to the site in the back. The applicant has reached out and worked with those two property owners to secure those updated access rights to account for access to this parcel. Currently, this site is zoned single-family residential R135 zoning. This is the last single-family residentially zoned piece of property in this area. All of the other properties surrounding it have, over time, rezoned to their current zoning conditions. Most recently, I believe, would be the open space zoning to the north of the TPC golf course, which left then this as the last remaining piece. The request being sought tonight is to change that single-family zoning to highway commercial C3, which is consistent with the majority of the other existing commercial properties along that stretch of Frank Lloyd Wright to the south of this property, which are also zoned C3. There are some C4 zone properties for the auto dealerships further over to the south and west. In the context of this request and the general plan, this site falls within the mixed-use neighborhoods designation, which is consistent with the other commercial properties within that area. This site also falls in the Greater Air Park Character Area designation, and within that character area, this falls in the mixed-use AMU designation, which allows for the types of commercial uses that you would find in that district and is consistent with the other commercially zoned properties surrounding it. I mentioned proximity to the airport. Just for some additional context on that, this site falls within the AC2 airport overlay zone, which is the middle of the outward buffers away from the airport. It also falls within two of the noise contours, again moving outwards from the airport, the 60 DNL and the 55 DNL boundaries. So focusing in on the two requests for you tonight, the first is a zoning district map amendment from that R135 single-family residential zoning on the site today to highway commercial C3 to align with the surrounding commercial properties. The second component to the request tonight is a conditional use permit request specific to vehicle storage within the site. That is a requirement under the proposed C3 zoning and would become a requirement if you approve the first request here. Some key points to make relative to this rezoning action. As I mentioned, this is the last single-family residentially zoned piece in this area, surrounded by many commercial uses. This zoning action would then allow for commercial uses on this property, as opposed to the residential use that doesn't necessarily fit the current site, but it's designated today. And another aspect of this rezoning that's important to keep in mind is the existing commercially zoned properties to the south, which are zoned C3, have a development standard requirement of a 50-foot building setback when they abut single-family residential zoning. And so this current designation imposes a setback on those other properties, and so the rezoning to C3 would remove that and bring several of those properties into conformance where they are currently within, they have buildings within that 50-foot buffer. The proposal for rezoning ultimately seeks to develop this site with a 3-story internalized community storage facility with an additional underground level to it. And incorporated into that site configuration is a 15-bay vehicle storage garage structure. That's the component that triggers the conditional use permit requirement that is tied in with this request. Notably, out of some of those development standards, the C3 zoning district would allow up to 36 feet of building height on that site. As I mentioned, the other properties are also zone C3, so that would be consistent in allowed development standards, although those other buildings are currently built to lower heights than the 36 feet allowed. This is the site plan that had been provided from the applicant. Given the size and the length of the site, it's a little bit difficult to convey visually here, so I've got a second slide here that helps put a few highlights on this, hopefully, to clarify. So the yellow boundary represents the property boundary for this site. I mentioned earlier it gains its primary access between the pro shop and the paint store, and so that's in and out through the blue arrow here as the main point of access. There is a intended secondary egress point that would be right turn only back out to Frank Lloyd Wright to relieve some of that traffic movement, but primarily the main drive would get back to the signalized intersection at Hayden and Frank Lloyd Wright and be the primary use. That westmost right turn exit drive is intended to be designed so that emergency vehicles could turn in there, but not so that it would be inviting as an entrance for normal vehicular traffic. Also notably, just in this site plan context, the western larger shaded rectangle on here is that 3-story internalized community storage building location. The eastern smaller would be the single-story garage structure. The application before you here was on your agenda at the last meeting. The applicant did request a continuance and to give more time to work with the neighbors on some concerns, and they did that and provided an updated site plan that also eliminates what was proposed as some covered vehicle storage at the west end of the site and eliminates some site walls that were in that location as well to attempt to open up more of the visibility of that site. So those changes hard to see on these graphics, but are represented in the documents in the staff report that you've been provided and the updated information there. Getting into the building details a little bit, the conceptual building elevations that were provided by the applicant team are here. This is representing the internalized community storage building, the primary building on the site that is, again, that sort of linear style building to fit within the shape of the property. And then the other building being the garage structure on the site. This is the single story further east that would contain the vehicle storage bays. I mentioned the conditional use permit component to that vehicle storage. As the covered external storage locations have gone away with the iterations of the site design, the primary point of any vehicle storage is going to be within that garage structure, and so that that drastically reduces any concerns, although there weren't any that we had identified. But it really brings everything into an enclosed building, and so we do not foresee any issues of noise, dust, odor, smoke, vibration, anything else that are typical things we look at with the conditional use permit criteria. We also do not expect there to be any unusual character or volume of traffic for that component of the use that would be different than the regular internalized community storage use on the property. This went before the Planning Commission back in April and received an approval recommendation, a vote of 6-0. And as I mentioned, it was continued from your last meeting to this meeting to allow more time to work through some details with the neighbors. Circling back again, just as a reminder of what the requests are tonight, we've got the first one being the zoning district map amendment from the R135 to the C3, and then the second being the conditional use permit approval relative to the vehicle storage component. And that concludes staff's presentation. The applicant team is here to provide additional details and answer questions that you may have as well.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. We will go to the applicant, then we will go to public comment. After the applicant, Greg Loper, Clear Sky Capital.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Greg Loper. With me this evening is John Stevenson and Matt Mason. I never remember his last name. That are with me here with Clear Sky Capital, developer of the site. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'd like to mention real quick, publicly thank Jeff Barnes for working with us on a nearly 2-year project. It's gone through a lot of iterations. I don't believe I see Mr. Lasota or Mr. Cassiano, the adjacent property owners, but wanted to thank them for working with us over the last several weeks to come up with changes to the site plan and changes to elevations that they are in favor of. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, thank you. I see there's several questions coming forward, but I would prefer to go on with public comment, and then we'll come back for questions that may have come forward.
Absolutely.
So at this point, I will ask for public comment. And seeing a nod no, there is no public comment. So you may return. And I say that seriously because we take public comment very seriously. So accordingly, I will close public comment and lead off with Councilwoman Littlefield and then Janik.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to confirm with you that you have met with your neighbors and that they are okay with this at this point.
Mayor, Councilmember Littlefield, yes, that is correct. I believe they submitted emails and/or letters to that effect.
All right, thank you.
Okay, excuse me, we'll go to Vice Mayor Durham and then Councilwoman Janik.
Thank you, Mayor. A question for you or for Mr. Barnes, whoever can answer it. Is this going to go before the Development Review Board? Okay. I would urge you to work with the Development Review Board to see if we can make this project more beautiful. I know it is a parking garage in the end, and there's a limit that can be done just by the nature of the beast, but I would urge both the DRB and you to work together to see if there are things that can be done to give it a better presentation, such as possibly windows, real or imagined, or other features. So, and I appreciate your working with the neighbors. I know that you have. I've been in contact with Mr. Lasota, and I know that he no longer has any objections. Thank you.
Thank you, and if I could, Mayor and Vice Mayor Durham, members of council, the elevations you saw before you, we like to say that was reflective of the majority of the buildings that are in the center, directly to the south of us today. The vision coming forward is more of what's planned by some of those existing buildings as they get redeveloped, and I believe the element you talked about, faux windows or real windows, a more modern look is exactly what you're going to be seeing when it goes to Development Review Board, which it has to go to.
Thank you, Councilwoman Janik, and then Councilwoman Whitehead, and then hopefully we'll have a main motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with what both my council members have said, and I wanted to thank you for conducting respectful negotiations with people that perhaps you had disagreements with. You came to a good conclusion, and this is a very good example for the rest of our community to follow when there are disagreements about how a project should proceed. So thank you very much for cooperating on that issue. It makes it much easier for all of us sitting here. Thank you.
Mayor and Councilmember Janik, I thank you and I appreciate that, but I really have to give hats off to Mr. Lasota, Mr. Cassiano, and those folks for really being respectful of what our vision was, and we were respectful of theirs. You know, the old saying, sing kumbaya, it happened, so we were happy.
Councilwoman Whitehead?
Well, I concur with everybody. I was really pleased that you guys took the extra time and just got everybody on the same page. And what a difficult little nook. And I think it's a really awesome use. You know, people are going to really appreciate having that storage. And that was pretty good that you guys were able to think of that. So I am going to motion to approve item 35, the Frank Lloyd Wright Storage Rezoning and Conditional Use Permit 8 ZN 2021 and 16 UP 2021, and adopt ordinance number 4543, approving a zoning district map amendment from single-family residential R135 to highway commercial C-3 on a plus-minus 3.38 acre site located at parcel number 215-51-026, and find that the conditional use permit criteria have been met, and adopt resolution number 12461 approving a conditional use permit for vehicle storage associated to the proposed highway commercial C3 zoning on the site.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, please register your vote. Thank you, unanimous.
Thank you.
Good luck with your project. Next, we're going to item number 36, Scottsdale, Sustainable Water Management Principles. Brian Biesmeyer, Water Resources Executive Director, will be making the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, Brian Biesmeyer, Executive Director for Scottsdale Water, and I'm pleased to be able to present to you tonight Scottsdale's Sustainable Water Management Principles. These principles are a set of 9 compiled from existing Scottsdale Water's policies and practices, and with the intent of providing a transparent framework for sustainable water solutions for Scottsdale. There's one exception, in Policy 4, water and land use management does have a new element to it, so we'll get to that when we get to Policy 4. These principles were put together or consolidated by a water policy committee that consisted of the leadership team from Scottsdale Water, as well as Rob Millar from Economic Development, Aaron Perot from Planning and Development, and lately, Lisa McNeely, our Sustainability Director, and I appreciate Lisa's giving us a review on a very few day notice. She hats off to her for helping us out in a quick time period. The sustainable water management principles are shown above, and there's, again, 9 of them, and they span the width and breadth of what we do in Scottsdale Water. But because this was a team effort to put this together, you'll see a little bit of a team presentation, and we won't have the entire team up here, but I do have a couple key members of that, including Gretchen Baumgartner, our water policy manager, who heads up water resources and water conservation, and then Kevin Rose, our water administrator, who is really our chief operations officer, who all the operating parts of Scottsdale Water work for him. So when we talk the first principle, water quality, really that's a pillar of what we do. Water utilities are unique in the fact that we provide a consumptive commodity into everybody's home on a 24-hour-a-day basis. So water quality is a key pillar of what we do. So some of these, and I'll outline some of them, there's actually more in the document, but I'll outline some of the key ones. We're going to build, operate, and maintain and monitor water treatment facilities that provide quality drinking water that meet, of course, all federal and state standards. One caveat that I think is important is at Scottsdale, we build our treatment facilities, we design them and build them to treat for 50% of the maximum contaminant level, so that we try to build and design our facilities to treat for half of what the state and federal requirements are. We comply, of course, with the amended record of decision and other agreements with the Superfund site and the North Indian Bend Superfund site. And then we're going to maintain a cross-connection and backflow program. And this is not talked about a lot, but it's an important part of our drinking water system, because we provide water to industrial and commercial customers who do things on their property, and we want to ensure that that water, whatever the processes are on their property, does not come back into our drinking water system. And so we have a backflow prevention program. It's ongoing, it's active, it exists today, and there's thousands of backflow devices that are out in our water system that we check and ensure, we check them annually to ensure that or we require checks of them annually to ensure that they work. We're going to operate and maintain our reclaimed and recycled water systems to meet all permits. We're going to maintain an industrial pretreatment program, and this is kind of the flip side to the backflow prevention program. So we have industrial users that have the potential to use on their property in their uses chemicals that could overwhelm our treatment facilities, and so we require monitoring of their systems and sometimes pre-treatment so that what's discharged into our wastewater system, we are able to treat and then recycle that water. And we operate and maintain a water quality laboratory, and we're going to meet all those standards. As well as the important parts of a water quality laboratory is the ability to get sample results back faster by the city operating that facility. So we can get those samples back faster, and we're talking about water quality issues. The faster, the better. That allows for faster reactions. And then the last one is we are the water quality experts for the city, and while we don't operate the stormwater system, we do monitor the permit and do all the permitting requirements for a stormwater permit. And with that, I'll have Gretchen come up for principles 2 through 5.
A little shorter than Brian. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Gretchen Baumgartner. I'm the Water Policy Manager. One of my tasks here at Scottsdale is to manage our water conservation staff and programs. So Principle 2 of this document outlines 2 main objectives of the conservation program. One of those is to provide the resources and tools available to all of our customers to be able to conserve water. And the next one is to provide educational opportunities so these customers understand that we're a desert city and water is a finite resources and they are stewards of it, all of them are. And how do they do that? By conserving water within each one of their properties as also their businesses. How do we achieve this objective, these two objectives? So we develop and administer innovative conservation programs. For several decades now, we've had conservation programs in the city of Scottsdale. Although the conservation programs we have today are not what they were yesterday. That's because we're innovative. We continue to look at our programs and find ways to make them better. We find ways to examine our customer base and what their needs are, and also what technology available to them. Also, we have a diversified conservation program because our customers are diverse. We have small single-family residents. We have large single-family residents. We have small multifamily. We have large multifamily. We have an array of different commercial entities within the city, and each one has a different aspect of conservation and how they are most efficient. So we need to have a diverse suite of options available to them. And the third item here is engage in local discussions. Scottsdale is not an island amongst itself. We need to have innovative conversations with our partner cities. We need to learn from them, and we need to also teach them. That includes our partner cities across the valley, but also the state, as well as local and federal government agencies. And the fourth is to comply with those regulatory obligations that we have with the state and make sure that all the data available to us is accessible to them, as well as any state reporting requirements. The third principle I'm going to cover is water resources planning. Now, this is a great topic for right now. As we all understand in the news and what's happening right now is very critical in the state and the desert Southwest planning. There's two main focuses of this principle. The first one is water resource compliance. As we are in the Phoenix Active Management Area, we are governed under the 1980 Groundwater Management Act and the rules under the Phoenix Active Management Area. So to stay under compliance is paramount for us. But also long-term planning. How do we look at the future, this uncertain future in front of us, and find the arrays of possibilities, and how do we plan for it? I'm going to talk about the regulatory compliance. We are a designated city with the 100-year assured water supply through the Arizona Department of Water Resources. Now, that designation is up for renewal every 15 years or so. We are up for renewal in 2025. In this next fiscal year, we will go through that process to redesignate. And during that process, we will have many conversations with the state agency as well as our partner cities to put our best foot forward. We also recharge underneath our feet within our service area as well as regionally. So we want to make sure that we're up to date with those permitting processes and infrastructure needs. And we want to make sure we actively pursue and understand our water rights and put our best foot forward. That includes both the Colorado system and the Salton Verde system. Those two systems have different water right framework. We are actively involved in the general stream adjudication on the Salton Verde side. We're part of a 4-member city that has outside counsel that gives us recommendations, and we have active conversations, as well as city attorney's office conversations with the general stream adjudication. We have active conversations with the Central Arizona project when it comes to our Colorado River supply. The 2007 interim guidelines are up for expiration in 2026, and we're an active member and role when we have conversations with Arizona Department of Water Resources, Central Arizona Project, as well as our regional and state partners. We are on the steering committee for the renegotiations for the 2026 interim guideline update. So let's talk a little bit about long-term planning. This document lays out that we are here to ensure resiliency and sustainability in that water supply. However, with bullet number 2, there's a lot of uncertainty in that. So why conservation will always be an important component of what we do, understanding the uncertainty of what's flowing or not flowing down the river is a really important component of figuring out what our supplies are. And then, importantly, number 3, we need to identify those policies that will affect the city, both locally, regionally, and also on a federal level. The implications and how they affect Scottsdale in the long term, potential new sources that could be out there, the cost, potential exchange of partners, and how we move water in a different manner in the future. So in summary on that one, because I know this is a really important one right now, we need to engage in all swaths of local, regional, and federal, potential extended long-term droughts, supply scenarios. These are the worst-case scenarios. We need to evaluate those. And then potential acquisitions of future supplies. I know a couple months ago we came before you and talked about the Bartlett Dam modification study. We're on that steering committee to talk about that. That is a potential new additional supply. So the last principle that I'm going to talk about tonight is the new one that we haven't explored before. This is our water and land use management principle. So this guiding principle, if you choose to approve this tonight, will put in place those bigger conversations in the city of what this looks like. So the voters came and voted our general plan several months ago. Within that general plan is a land use plan. We use that land using every 5 to 7 years in our integrated water resource master plan to project out our water usage. Now, sometimes that can be slightly challenging when you have rezoning issues and which affect demand. So the idea and concept for this is to really have a bigger conversation for those users that rezone that have a larger quantity of water and need. So what does that look like? Within this plan, any development that comes in that uses 100,000 gallons a day, excluding fire flow, or more, will warrant a bigger conversation with the city. Now, you should know there are a handful of cities in the valley that have a very similar type policy, and this level trigger is similar to what some of the other valley cities have as well. So what would we be asking of these developments? There are 4 major things that we would be asking. They would, if they triggered that 100,000 gallons per day, they would be asked to produce what's called a water demand exhibit. And so that means they have to talk about exactly how much water they need and also how much wastewater they will incur and develop. Now, this is something those developers are already doing with their engineering basis of design. So we'll examine this in a little more detail. Number 2 is we'll also examine the difference between the water that they need and also the wastewater that they produce. Not all developments are created equal. Some of them produce more return flow into our collection system where we can collect that and treat that up at the campus for beneficial use, and some do not. This will be a point of conversation with those developers. The third one, for those developers that want to use up to 100,000 or more gallons per day, would be required to use a certain amount of conservation efforts above and beyond what they already are required in code to do. And the fourth one would be if those folks wanted larger portions of water, they have to have a bigger detailed examination of what value they bring to our community. How much population do they serve? What economic value do they bring into the city? Are they a resort industry? Are they a hospitality industry? Are they healthcare industry? How do they explain that value that they bring to the city? And so this demand exhibit would have them summarize and really detail out what exactly value they think they bring to the city, and that means the city can have a conversation about what value they think that is for us. And with that, I will turn that back to Brian. Oh, I have one more slide, my apologies. This is an example slide. I pulled several different developments over the last several years. These are just 3 of them, A, B, and C, of what water they put in their basis of design and what wastewater they put in their basis of design. So you can see they range from 100,000 up to 300, 400,000 gallons per day, and then their return flow. The next steps for this would be for water, economic development, and planning to have a bigger conversation to figure out what that criteria is so it can go on to the review process, the development review process for consideration. And I will turn that back to Brian.
Thank you. Perhaps,
To Kevin.
perhaps just to handle this in sections, we'll ask questions up to item 4. Councilwoman Whitehead and Councilmember Millhaven.
Thank you, Gretchen. First of all, that is a really interesting slide. So what did you mean? You said move water in a different manner. What did you mean?
Oh. You're talking about this one, the exchange partners?
Yeah. You made a comment about we will have to move water in a different manner, and I wasn't sure. I'm trying to see where that is.
So bullet number 3, the second line, it identifies new sources and it potentially identifies exchange partnerships. So every provider has a different manner of infrastructure in place. And right now we have a tendency, there are some exchanges in place for different providers, but I think the drought and the potential supplies in the future will have a broader conversation about how to move water. The city of Phoenix and the city of Avondale have something set in place where they move water through the city of Phoenix's system to Avondale, and infrastructure-wise, it works really well for those 2 cities. There's several other examples. So as we move forward, exchange partnerships will be necessary.
Okay, yeah, it was totally different than what I was thinking, so thanks for explaining.
Thank you, Councilmember Millhaven.
Thank you. Can you give us some context? What kind of a use would use 100,000 gallons a day?
There are a number of developments that will come in and use 100,000 gallons or more a day. We have a decent amount of developments that do. I don't know if I necessarily want to talk about specific developments, as I know some of them are still in the queue to find ways.
Well, to give us some context, like what would an average home use in a day?
Oh, an average home, so a Scottsdale single-family resident uses about an acre-foot a day. So the EPA says about 100 gallons per person per day would be an average American home. So if you have 5 people, you can do the math, but exterior is different. So the EPA says about 100 gallons per person per day for a single-family resident.
For the internal use of the building?
For both internal and external, but that's a nationwide statistic. Now, if you'd like me to get more statistics on Scottsdale families, I can't produce it at the time, but I definitely can go back and look at this afterwards.
No, that helps. I mean, 100,000 gallons of water sounds like a lot when you don't
We're
have
talking
context.
very large commercial developments.
Thank you very much. And then can you tell us a little bit more about the Assured Water Supply Program? Could you tell us what that's about and sort of where we stand with that?
Yeah, there are a number of different facets to the assured water supply. Like I said, we go through that process every 15 years or so. It takes into account the physical availability of those different supplies. I know I talked about this about a month or so ago. So the Salt River Project supply, actually Salt River Project just finalized their study on that, and they used some climate change scenarios in that. So it'll look a little different from our 2010 designation. It takes all the different elements of our supply, but then it also matches up to our projected demand. And because we just did our water resources integrated master plan, those demands within that will be in the next designation.
I mean, does it evaluate our ability to meet those demands?
It does.
And where are we?
We're currently, we're going through that paperwork. We have to have a conversation with the department. Some of the things about the designation is it looks a swath of 100 years. So when we're looking at SRP water, for example, SRP water is managed in a way that it ebbs and flows, and so that the similar bucket you get one year is not what you get the next year. So there's a challenge in some of our water supplies. If you look at 100 years, the snapshot for 100 years isn't the same snapshot for 1 year at a time. So right now we're doing okay, but as we go through that paperwork and have a conversation with the department, we'll find out where we lie.
Okay, and then your recommendation here for Principle 4 is additional information to help make a decision, not that it would dictate a decision.
You wanna, yes.
Thank you.
Good. This may also be for Brian and you. Obviously, you're well prepared on this presentation, and we'll have the 3 other points to hear. But I do want to, at this point, 5 days ago, the Assistant Secretary of the Interior, Trujillo, mentioned that essentially gave an ultimatum to the 7 states to come forward with very let's just say comprehensive and a deeper cut program. I'm guessing that happened before this slide, your slideshow was prepared before this. And so those standards and that ultimatum is very real because of the shortages in the Colorado river basin, the lower and upper. So I guess as we continue on, Brian, maybe you could just mention that my general question, though, is that at what point, that's the ultimatum essentially to the states, but then we have, to Arizona, and then we have to produce, deeper cuts and conservation and according to those principles. When do you foresee some sort of a conversation to address that ultimatum?
Mayor and Council, yeah, that information is going to come back, and the state has through August to make those proposals back to the federal government. We expect sometime in August to learn what the state's proposal back is, and so our thought would be to come back to council in late August or September and discuss what we found out and what those implications are for us. As we look at the potential scenarios prior to that announcement, we were looking at a possible Tier 2A or B cutbacks on the Colorado River. They're currently in Tier 1, so it would be an upping of that. But with this, potentially even deeper cuts on our CAP allocation. Again, as Gretchen mentioned, it's an evolving situation, and we're trying to learn as much as we can of what the state's proposal back. But we certainly suspect, with good reason, that the cuts will be deeper than we've anticipated.
Sure. And then, for instance, the 100,000 gallons per day criteria might come back at 50,000 criteria to trigger some sort of, let's just say, further study and explanations on input and output and so forth. We don't know yet, but we'll
Mayor,
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, these are certainly open for discussions, and certainly as we go into, first of all, I should backtrack and say these are principles. So we set these principles up, and they're not, they're overarching guiding principles. But with, say, a specific like 100,000 gallons per day requirement, I think as we get deeper into our drought management plan, that might be something the drought management team would come back and recommend to council that we lower that threshold, because water is just that much more important.
Thank you. So continue with the next principles.
And I've got Kevin Rose coming up next.
Hello, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Kevin Rose. I'm the Water Resource Administrator over the day-to-day operations. I'll present the next three. They're turning it back over to Brian and more of an operational perspective. Principle 5 has 5 components to it, where we look at the water recycle and reuse. And some of these things we are already doing. The first thing is Scottsdale is always seen on the forefront with reclaimed water. We'll remain engaged not only at the regional and state level, but also at the national level on regulatory requirements for reclaimed water. We'll, as point 2 points out, continue to expand the recycled water system and replace a potable water system where possible. Point 3, we'll continue to maintain our equipment for the reclaimed system. It's an important system for us and for our customers, so we'll keep those standards up. Point 4, we'll not only adopt existing ordinances, but we'll create new ordinances and policies that require the use of reclaimed water where applicable. And point 5 is we'll continue our great education programs. Some of you are aware of our Citizens Academy and have attended. We're excited to begin that going this fall again. We'll also leverage our water conservation team, who does a fantastic job engaging the community and local organizations here in Scottsdale. Principle 6 is kind of our operational philosophy on recharge and recovery. For the past few decades, we've done a wonderful job recharging the water here in the aquifers. Our goal is to minimize groundwater use. We use that during peak times or maintenance activities, typically in the summertime, as right now. Then we also look at the winter time to maximize our recharge. And we've been doing this for a few decades now. We know with the drought coming that there may be years that we won't be in recharge mode, but be in recovery mode. And we're also more focused on recharging within the city of Scottsdale boundaries. And the last principle I'll discuss is our infrastructure. One of our strengths is planning, and we do a great job planning for our infrastructure, not only to ensure we meet the customer demands for today, but it's an investment into our future. And with our capital improvement plan, there's 3 components that we look at, or documents that we use, which is our Integrated Water Resource Master Plan, our Infrastructure Improvement Plan, commonly referred to as the IIP, and the Technology Master Plan to help reinforce and help us strategize where we need to be investing in our infrastructure for the future. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Thank you, Kevin. On financial planning, we're going to mirror the comprehensive financial policies that you adopted in February. And our sustainable water management policies also include guidance for proper management, stewardship, and safeguarding our assets, as well as long-term financial stability. Specifically, as Council knows, we are an enterprise fund, and we are funded by our rates and fees and rates and fees only. We base those on direct, indirect recovery of cost, including our infrastructure needs. And they're based on multi-year financial plans that we review annually. Reserves are required, fully funded, and require council approval to access. We have to meet our bond covenants, and we have a development fee program to have growth pay for growth within the limits of state law. Climate change and drought. To address these our long-term resiliency, the city's takes this seriously, and the council has adopted a drought management plan. We want to be part of the city's overall sustainability efforts, and Scottsdale Water is going to participate on the regional, state, national, and international levels where possible on water supply augmentation projects and firming. That's part of what Gretchen talked about earlier. And with that, our staff recommendation is approval of resolution number 12539, pending your questions.
Well, at this point, and before any motion or further comment, I just want to open for public comment. And seeing none, why then I would close public comment for the Scottsdale Sustainable Water Management Principles. I see Councilwoman Janik and then Councilwoman Caputi.
Thank you all for all that very good information. Really appreciate it. And an email came through yesterday from the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, which I'm sure you saw. But I want everybody here and everybody listening to know this. We recognize that water conservation will be even more critical, not because it'll solve the supply issue on the Colorado River, but because it protects and enhances each city's water portfolio so our communities remain resilient. And I think that is one of the major goals from what you presented. This is something all of us can do something about. And I'm asking all of us to start conserving water and try to reduce your use by 5%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Caputi.
Brian, just thank you for that awesome presentation. Again, there's always a lot of gloom and doom and scary comments, and of course, water is a scarce resource. We live in the desert, but I just want to say that our city is doing a fantastic job with this. And as was repeated many times, we are planning. We don't make off-the-cuff decisions. We're actually taking into account water usage based on what we're doing going forward in terms of development, and we are planning carefully. We have a drought management plan, and again, I'm incredibly proud of what we're doing here, and I'm sure someone's going to go ahead and give a motion. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'll make a motion. There we go. I motion to approve item number 36, Scottsdale Sustainability Water Management Principles, and request that we adopt resolution number 12539, approving and adopting the Scottsdale Sustainable Water Management Principles and authorizing the Water Resources Executive Director to execute any other documents and take such other actions as necessary to carry out the intent of the resolution.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your vote.
Okay. It wouldn't come on.
Okay, we have unanimous yes. Thank you very much, Brian. We're moving on to item number 37, fiscal year 2022-23 property tax levies. Our presenter is Judy Doyle, Budget Director. Hello.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor and council members. On June 7th, we held a Truth in Taxation hearing and a public hearing on the fiscal year 22-23 property tax levies and rates. At that time, I had mentioned that state statute requires that the hearings be held at least 14 days prior to actually assessing the levies and fixing the rates, which is what we are doing this evening. Nothing has changed since the June 7th meeting. The fiscal year 22-23 combined secondary and primary levy is decreasing $3.7 million from fiscal year 21-22, with the rate also decreasing 10 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. So the action tonight is to adopt ordinance number 4547, assessing the primary and secondary property tax levies and fixing the rates. And that concludes my brief presentation.
Thank you. At this point, I would call for public comment. Seeing none, I will therefore close public comment. Councilwoman Janik.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 4547, assessing the fiscal year 2022-23 primary and secondary property tax levies and fixing the primary and secondary property tax rates.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. See no further discussion. Please record your vote. Thank you. Unanimous. Next, we have item number 38, fiscal year. That is FY 2022-23, Street Light Improvement District Property Tax Levy. Presenter Judy Doyle, Budget Director.
Thank you. Yeah, on June 7th, the city also held a public hearing on the fiscal year 22-23 Municipal Streetlight Improvement District Property Tax Levy. Again, nothing has changed since that June 7th meeting. The levy request for fiscal year 22-23 is $524,844 for the city's 355 streetlight districts to cover the electric utility costs of operating the street's lights within the districts. The action tonight is a request to adopt ordinance number 4548, assessing the fiscal year 22-23 Streetlight Improvement District Property Tax Levy by district in accordance with the Arizona Revised Statutes and the City Charter. And that concludes my brief presentation.
Thank you. I now open public comment. Seeing none, accordingly close public comment. Open for a main motion. Vice Mayor Durham.
I second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Vice Mayor Durham and a second. Seeing no comment, please register your vote. Thank you. Unanimous. Thank you so much, Judy. Next, we will move on to a receipt of citizen petition. This is an opportunity, according to our charter, to receive a citizen petition, which would have been recorded down or delivered to the clerk's office. Seeing none, item number 39 is closed. Moving on to mayor and council items. Item number 40 initiates City Council review of Development Review Board's June 2nd, 2022 decision regarding 25 DR 2021, the Goldwater. This item was brought forward by me for consideration of certain issues on the Goldwater project. Subsequently, the applicant, who is here as well, came forward with some minor modifications, which were reviewed by staff and accepted and recorded. I will not make a motion for consideration of the DR Board decision by the City Council. Therefore, that item is closed. Are there any other mayor and council items tonight? Okay, seeing none, I therefore adjourn the regular portion of the City Council meeting and convene the work study session. Therefore, I call to order the June 21st, 2022 City Council Work-Study Session to order. For the record, I note that the complete council, including Vice Mayor Durham, is here and present, as well as all charter officers. The work-study session provides a less formal setting for the mayor and council to discuss specific topics with each other and city staff, and provides staff an opportunity to receive direction from the council. The presenter for tonight's work-study session on housing options has a conflict, and this item will need to be continued to a future meeting date. May I have a motion to continue item 1 to a future meeting date to be determined?
So moved.
I have a motion to continue the item to a, Councilwoman Janik?
I was informed that Ben Lane was able to find July 6th at 4 p.m. Date and time for the Home Arizona presentation.
Mayor, Council, we're finalizing that date and time.
Okay.
And so if we can leave the motion open to a date to be determined, it would be appreciated.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Great, that's the clarification that we have. So we have a motion to continue in a second. Any further discussion? Okay, please record your vote. Thank you, unanimous. Finally, are there any other mayor and council items tonight? Seeing none, I adjourn the regular portion of the city council meeting. Oops, excuse me. I would therefore ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded, please record your vote. Thank you, it's unanimous. Have a good evening.